Alright. I'm going to be testing this thing out. Make sure it still works. Oh boy. There's a delay. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh. Okay. Audio works. Time to spread the word. Well, until I can't, because something, I don't know if it's because it's messes with the algorithm or whatnot. Like, at least with Twitter or whatever, you try to share a link for YouTube, and if you just try to copy the URL and then paste it in there, it just gives you the title of it. You have to go in and actually share the thing and copy the link from there. It is, as one would say, mildly annoying, but it is it's kind of how that goes sometimes. Alright, there is that. Alright, one more, and then I will be good to go. Okay. Alright, there we go. Situated. Easy. Okay, alright. I am situated, but I am also not. Let's see. There. Well, there we go. Heidi. Okay. Good gravy. Alright, well, howdy hi. It's been a hot minute. I apologize. And I won't be able to read Saturday. Hopefully I'll be able to read Sunday next week. I have to work on another Saturday, so... But that's all right. I am okay with it. I'll just say that I'm okay with it. It's actually not that bad, but it does make things, when you try to keep things on the regular, makes it a tiny bit harder to continue doing, but that's okay. So apologies for missing the last couple weeks. I completely just whiffed on last week. I was, and then the week prior I had to work, and then, and that was the other thing too. I was like, missed it, and then Easter, so it was kind of like, I don't want to do that on Easter. People might be doing stuff, so yeah. But hope people are doing well. Got my Mothman shirt on, as you do. I'm sporting the proper Saturday attire of a Mothman t-shirt and a Sleeping Kirby hat, as one does. But yeah. So just to throw it out, we're at about 193. Not about. We are literally at 193 pages. 193 pages of 432. So almost about halfway through. Today is just going to be one chapter because it's like 20 some odd pages. It's a hefty chapter. So, yeah, 24 pages. It looks like 23, 24. So, we're just going to stick with one chapter for today. And next week we'll read on Sunday. I just want to get this details all out. March. How about May? Forward in the clock there. May 4th. So, get your Star Wars jokes in, I guess. I don't know. Not a big Star Wars fan. Okay. But what's been going on in the story here? Um, they the group they performed in Walleran, and then went into the forest the following day. And in the forest, they encountered a young man who had been captured by the Saul, which have popped up, at least in name and reference, throughout the story so far. They are these northern barbarian folk who they there's a lot that could be said about them, but we'll just say that they are northern barbarian folk who uh, the Paralians, the people of Parail are not too keen on. They don't really like them. They do not have a very high opinion of them. So, and so this boy had somehow managed to escape after being kidnapped, and set to be sold into slavery of some sort, and runs into the group, and the group, for the most part, is like, hey, Ribson the monk is a lot more leery-eyed, like, I don't like you. I don't like you. I don't like you one bit. So, and that is where we find ourselves. As they wake in the morning, we have chapter 20, Flodne, the crossroads of Parail. Step by step, the six trekked without a word between them. Though no evidence of Malam's kidnappers were found around the crumbling shrine or nearby, Dieter never wavered in his vigilance, repeatedly glancing back down the forest path they had already traveled for any possible signs of being trailed. The harried sense of doggedly being pursued at first caused no trouble. By the high peak of day, though, the chains of concern had grown heavy on their hearts and their legs. The cold did not help matters either. No heat crept between the thinning canopy of leaves to dispel the chill night had brought. Those same leaves that only yesterday seemed to be so alive with the colors of fall had dulled, browning, and shriveling. Accompanying this, a dampness seeped into the atmosphere, making the air colder and colder. Winter drew nearer. Jaharl and Tamelia traded his cloak back and forth, so Malam could continue to wear Tamelia's. To their unspoken relief, the boy kept pace with the group, despite the harrowing ordeal he had recently experienced. At times, he seemed to be pushing them more than the other way around. At a consistent pace, they moved over hills and thickening forest, determined to avoid potential danger. Finally! Tamelia cleared the folial forest and bounded onto the road. She rubbed her arms and stamped her feet, kicking up little clouds of dust in the process. I don't know what's worse, the cold or not being able to talk that whole time. I don't know. I thought the silence was a nice change of pace. Ribson stretched his limbs and waited for everyone else to catch up. He must have been really wanting to get out of there. The others are still finding their way out. We started to move in single file after that last scare. They watched as Jaharl emerged from the forest. Probably for the better. It was more than likely some clumsy animal, but better safe than sorry. Thank goodness we're done with that. Jaharl tossed his cloak to his friend. I hope we aren't too far from Falatne. My feet would like a break. Not too much farther. We'll get there shortly before dusk. That's why the pace was what it was for most of that trip. The monk observed Malam appear from the tree line. Goodness, that was rough, but I do appreciate you being so considerate. The boy skipped up to the trio, his face shone with a youthful exuberance and defiance of his latest ordeals. Save your thanks. I'm more concerned with reaching the next town so we can avoid any terrors fluttering in the night. Ribson turned away and created some space between himself and the others. The newest member of the traveling party shrugged. Not a lot that flutters at night, or in the forest. A few songbirds, maybe some scavengers, possibly an owl. Tamelia patted the boy's shoulder. Sorry, he just joined us a couple days before you, but he seems to always be this prickly. He seems to be always this prickly. I think I'm going to flip those words. I wouldn't expect him to warm up to you anytime soon. Hello, Slade. I wouldn't expect him to warm up to you anytime soon. Jaharl opened his loot case and inspected his instrument. Now it's time for thinking. Well, it looks all right. I wonder if I can play in Flodnay. I doubt it, though. Especially with the moon troop already there. Hey, what's that? Malam tried to catch a clearer view of the case's contents. Oh, it's a lute. Do you play? Reflexively, Jahar recoiled, clutching his case tightly to his body. Then he relaxed once he noticed the look he was being given. I do. Do you? The boy reached out, which was answered with the Mahrian pulling slightly back. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to show you if that's all right. With a stutter to his motion, the aspiring entertainer passed his lute to the boy, who quickly snatched it up. In a blink of an eye, with his head bent toward the instrument, his nimble fingers rapidly plucked away to judge its quality. He weathered a stone-set stare from the monk, and ignored the sudden appearance of Dieter and Josephine from the forest. He settled into a rhythm, like a horse going from a trot to a gallop. Then an expression splashed across his face as he bit the side of his tongue, a look Jaharl immediately recognized. A voice sprang from Malam, sounding sweet and welcoming to the ear, as he slowed his play to match the song he wanted to sing. Now I will make you suffer a little bit of sort of singing, if I can if I can remember how this tune goes for this little one. So, as the wind howl and our bellies growl. I can't sing this at all. As the winds howl and our bellies growl. Because I do not remember how I had this. As the wind. That and I can't sing worth nothing. So, as the. You know what? I'll change it a little bit. We'll do an audible for me because I can't sing worth nothing. As the winds howl and our bellies growl, winter's morning has come. Snow falls in flakes as we shiver awake. Warm days, here there are none. Icicles they glisten, but so few listen, and battles are rarely won. Go from the night to seek out the light, in hope spring will surely come. That's about as good as you're going to get out of me. Wow, that was great. Yeah, thank you, Story. Charles applauded as the boy softly finished the ditty. I've never heard that one before. Where did you learn it from? Oh, just a song my mother would sing to me. He passed the lute back to its owner. Thank you for playing for us. Josephine continued the applause. Yeah, you and Jahar should trade tips to help each other get even better, Tamilia added. If you don't want to, that's all right. Watching and hearing you play, that has already given me my own ideas, but anything extra helps. He carefully placed the lute away. Certainly, but perhaps that would be better done at another time. Malam nodded in the direction of the monk. He looks rather impatient now, yes? It would be for the better. Ripson barely finished his sentence before turning to the west. That's my west. I think. Yeah. I think that's west for me. Ripson barely finished his sentence before turning to the west and marching toward their next destination. A sharp chill pierced the air, leading the charge for a blanket of dark, thick clouds to follow. Gone was any faint hope of daylight providing rays of warmth. Dreariness choked the atmosphere as the group approached Flodnay. Right as they neared the town's eastern gate, the skies, unable to carry the burden any longer, relented, and flakes of snow were gifted to the soil below. Jarl tilted his head upward, rubbing his arms while eyeing his cloak still draped around his friend's shoulders. We're It'd be nice to wear that again. He bristled at the sight of the town's guards standing in front of a shut iron gate. On both sides of the gate, large trunks stood side by side with their tops carved to a point, like rows of wooden teeth. Directly to the gate's northern side, inside the town's walls, a tall watchtower of wood with a covered but wall-less platform offered a place for observations. Currently, 3 guards peered down below with crossbows aimed at the nearing group. Beyond the jagged tops of the wooden fortifications, some thatched roofs peeked overhead, trying to see who or what may be approaching or threatening the town. The folial forest receded from the town's protective barrier, recoiling at the sight of its bounty being morphed into such an unwelcoming presentation. Like a spreading rot, the ground surrounding Philodne offered dirt and small tufts of brittle grass. In front of the gate, one guard, with a crossbow slung to his side, adjusted the shoulder strap as he held his hands close to a lit brazier. I think that's how you say that. I probably butcher that, but I think that's how you say it, a brazier. Its housed flame ferociously whipped in defiance of the cold weather. The other guard, beside him, eyed the traveling group and, as they entered within earshot, hissed a command to his comrade as he gradually raised his own crossbow. The older man jerked his weapon and spat. "Slow your rush, lest you want to look like sickly trees with bolts for branches, you know." The group stopped in its track and exchanged looks and hushed murmurs, while Ripson pointed out the other guards in the watchtower. "Gellin, you stubborn fool, don't lie to me and act like you don't recognize me." The monk stepped forward, stretching out his burly arms. The grizzled guard blinked a few times before slightly lowering his weapon and leaning forward. "Well, I'll be damned and blessed by Nakri's coins, all the same. Ripson, they're still allowing you to seek an audience with King Quentin? I would have thought they'd have stuck you with cleaning duties at that monastery of yours for the rest of your days." Ripson's face tightened. "I'm stuck cleaning up a much larger mess." Yellen fired a bolt into the ground directly to his right and snorted. Then he motioned for the other guards to be at ease and to open the gate. "Small wonder nothing gets done around here. None of them are as serious as you. It's a good quality to have, monk. Or a maddening one." The old sentry snorted again and nodded in agreement. With a great moan, one of the gate doors swung open, revealing a small sliver of Philodne's townscape, a tinge of blue emanating from the stonework that made up the streets of the town. Like a veneer of ice layered the stones despite all the day's foot traffic. Through the small gap, short and stubby buildings, constructed by stones from the same quarry, clumped together as though they were huddling in groups to ward off the terrors of the natural world. "Go on, get in." Gellin waved for the group to enter. A sour grimace flashed across his face each time his arm completed a full rotation. Right before slipping through the entrance, the young pair stopped beside the guard, gesturing them inside. The two traded inquisitive looks with Gellin, whose brow crumpled at the perceived sight of them dragging their feet to enter. "Go on, I ain't in the mood for chatting. Cold's already got my teeth moving enough as it is." "Hold on." Camellia held out a hand, which caused the guard's mouth to tighten. "We were only wondering how many people left Philodne to go to Walleran yesterday and today, and maybe the day before yesterday." Jahal surveyed the sentry's face. Gellin answered with a scrunched-up expression, as though he had caught a whiff of something foul in the air. "You fall from the sky, or dig yourselves out of the soil this morning, or something?" Jahal pointed to the northeast in the general direction of the shrine. "We helped Ripson inspect an old shrine in the woods, so we might have missed crossing paths with some of our friends." A brief moment of warmth washed over Gellin's face as a throaty chuckle escaped his lungs. He's wrangled you lot in his owl searches. Saedra blessed this group. Oh no. Tamelia let out a raspy grunt and cleared her throat. Well, then bless us yourself with an answer, and we'll be on our merry way. A curious eye studied the duo. After a brief moment, the sentry inhaled so deeply that his upper body appeared to have grown double in size. When he exhaled, it sounded like a breeze sneaking through a crack in the wall. I don't know if I can. Like so. Saedras bless you too, indeed. No one's been leaving this way for the last 3 or 4 days. Especially been the case with the Moon Troop here preparing for the show. Oh, any word on when they're performing? Tamelia shot a brief sideways glance at her friend. Not sure. They're the dramatic type, so they're probably waiting or wanting to build up I almost said nonsense. The suspense. The sauce, as it were. Wanting to build up the suspense. Maybe they're waiting for good snow or something. This one's a little too early to tell. Yellen held out his hand, watching as a few snowflakes landed on his hand and disappeared. Then he turned his back on the two. Now leave me be. Plenty of others you can pester about your owl praying trips and the Moon Troop. If you're needing to find someone or something, try that A over your girl. Not wanting to press the guard's patience further, the pair thanked him and slipped inside the protection of Philodne's walls. As the gate was roughly shut behind them, a short gasp of air followed the two, slithering up Jarl's back under his shirt. He rolled his shoulders and rubbed his chest and arms. Let's see if we can find a place to stay. With the Moon Troop here, we might have to rely on the gentle generosity of strangers. Josephine tugged on her own cloak, offering it to Jarl, only politely declined with a simple gesture. Similar to Walleran, stunted stone structures light up on both sides of the main road. Thin wooden planks shuttered many of the windows. Like rivulets pouring into a river, alleyways and smaller roads sporadically opened up as though the town itself was proffering many pathways for anyone to explore. Along much of the thoroughfare, large banners drifted along the breezes that sneaked into town. Against the more drab colors of faded blues and whites and earthy browns, and coupled with the light flurry of snow, those banners screamed the presence of the Moon Troop. Outlined in yellow and filled in with a rich purple, with a stark silver circle in its center, the woven banners projected a festive yet somewhat serious energy, which was extended and enhanced by the myriad of people moving about town. The farther to the west the group went, the more and more prominent the troop's presence became. While some of the people near the gate had acknowledged the group's arrival, most continued their own tasks without so much of a moment's glance at them. Merchants shouted over top of one another in an effort to sell trinkets, clothes, or anything to lighten their wares before evening settled to close out the day. One middle-aged woman, bundled perhaps too warmly in a multitude of coats, spotted Jarl out of the crowd, and motioned for the group to join her at her stall. "You there! Yes, you, young man! The one without the cloak, in this cold, come here." The group closed ranks, with Ripson and Tamelia standing at Jarl's side. With a little coaxing, they drifted away from clogging the middle of the street and stood in front of the woman's shop. Jarl stepped closer to provide himself a tiny bit of space between him and the others. Good sir, you seem to be, as we so often say back home, caught in winter's embrace." She bit her tongue and gave what looked to be a combination of a wince and a wink. Yes, as it were. The young man raised an eyebrow and directed a glance at Dieter, who stood directly behind him, before facing the vendor once more. "Back home? You're not from Pereira?" "Oh, divine winds, speak softly to this young man." The seller clasped her hands together and smiled widely, revealing an upper row of pristine teeth. I am from a faraway empire. Very far indeed." Jarl cocked his head. That's a pretty strong cocking there. Let's lessen the cocking. There we go. What's wrong with me? Jarl cocked his head to a slight angle. "I'm only aware of some of the places near Pereira. How far is far away? Maybe south of Clohall, Tamelia whispered to the farmers, which garnered a muted nod from Dieter. Or maybe she's from Rowan? Josephine studied the merchant's goods as closely as she could from where she was standing. The woman chuckled and waved her hand dismissively. Perhaps the divine winds do not speak so widely amongst you all. Dieter crossed his arms over his chest as his wife giggled and nudged her husband with an elbow, eliciting a sharp look. I guess those places may seem far to the eyes and hearts of Paralians now. The merchant tugged on the flap of one of her inner coats, pulling back to reveal a silver chain necklace threaded with an oval charm made of crimson silk with lettering in gold lame. She held out the charm as far as the chain would allow and spoke a flurry of sounds Jarl could not understand. Upon seeing his confused expression, she smiled as her pupils darted to the corner of her eyes while she hid her possessions back under her coat. I blessed your steps by asking the divine winds to guide you safely, wherever your journey in life guides you, young man. That is kind of you, but at this point, the combination of drained patience and exhaustion from the pace of travel had been enough. Ripson stepped forward, more than slightly unamused, with a tinge of darkness creeping into the creases of his growing scowl. A balauk? As if the street and the others on it had ceased to exist, a prolonged silence gripped the group as the woman stared wide-eyed at the monk. Like a crashing wave, countless memories ruptured before her eyes as they darted from one direction to another, then another, and another after that. Her jaw clenched so tightly, her head began to tremble. As suddenly as that word had unlocked distant, long-ago terrors, the vivacity of life returned to the merchant. I am from the Aurelian Empire. You are correct in thinking the state of Kolug, but I'm not from Balauk. Ripson grunted, a mixture of acknowledgement and disgust. Is that how it is there now? It has been ever since the Night of Ash. With a curt nod, he turned to Jaharom. Buy a damn cloak from this woman, and let's be on our way. She's lost and needs to find a way back home. Make a little note here. Yeah. Okay. The woman spat out a phrase in yet another different language at Ripson, who did not respond and continued his way toward the center of town. The heat of agitation did not leave her words when she addressed the young man once more. Well, do you want one? If not, follow your Sudog friend's shadow and leave my sight. Jarl shot questioning looks in the direction of his traveling comrades. Without much prodding from them, he lifted a finger and pointed at the one that caught his eye. All right, I'd like the dark green one. In one continuous movement, she unfastened the myrtle green cloak from the cord it was hanging on and tossed it onto the ledge in front of her. Show me what you think it's worth. Thinking. All right, I'll be proper and spend a reason about. No need to overpay. Jaharo cautiously sifted through his money satchel, with the words of Ripson echoing in his ears. He fished out 4 copper coins and offered them to the vendor. The woman scoffed. Miserly, no doubt taught by the Sudog. It's 20 or be off with you. Tamelia stepped forward to defend her friend, but Josephine caught her by the shoulder. When she spun around to protest, she was greeted with both of the farmers mouthing for her to let him take care of it. As that was happening, Jaharo fumbled through the coin purse to match the price asked. After a few moments of searching, he found what he needed and set the coins next to the cloak. Without pause, the woman snatched up the money and pointed to the green piece of clothing. All right, take it and be on your way. The winds grow colder the longer you stand there in front of my shop. Jarl grabbed the cloak and draped it around himself and fastened it with a quiet word of appreciation seeping from his lips in one smooth motion. Then the 5 traced the steps of their monk companion westward through the center of Faladne. When they caught up to him, he was standing directly in front of a large inn that was proudly displaying 4 banners of the Moon Troop. On the second story, a balcony with wooden railing protruded away from the stone building. While not ornate, the sight reminded the young pair of the observation deck back in Machre that overlooked the east into Olteo. On either side of the balcony, mostly shuttered windows hinted at a heavily occupied location. However, those on the ground floor were not, and the glow of candle and lantern lights spilled their amber hue outside. Though mostly drowned out by the cacophony of civilization, as people finished up their duties and dusk approached, the faint bubbling of revelry seeped outside, barely audible to the group. We ought to be able to secure some lodging here for the night, even during the busier seasons. Malco has done what he has needed to do to free up a room for me. Ripson slowly faced the group. His stern expression from before was unchanged. While that is nice and will be greatly appreciated, I'd like to know what had you and that merchant all flustered. Jarl bristled underneath his newly purchased cloak. I could have gotten this for a better deal had you not gone and bothered her about Balauk or whatever. Aye, what was that about? Why are you always so grumpy? Tamilia gestured with her hands in the air and shrugged in the direction of the monk and Malam. Ripson scoffed. And you could have easily gone to another vendor. Instead, you pressed on without considering another option. That's a bit unfair. If you would have stayed out of the conversation, we could have had a nice conversation and deal. She crossed her arms to match the monk's irritated demeanor. Nor does that answer my own question. Young man mimicked his friend. The weathered farmer forced out a cough. Alrenian Empire? Alrenian Empire? That is quite a long way south of Bruntil. I didn't realize Kolug was part of the Empire now. Usually that sort of takeover is shouted by town criers from the tallest buildings for seasons. Is that a rather recent development? Ripson's head tilted in the direction of the old man. He squinted for a second as he briefly studied his traveling companion. You are quite the odd farmer, Dieter. Seems unnecessary to me to know about such things when your hands should be full of tools and dirty from tilling soil. And for a monk not from this land, you certainly care a lot about what a simple farmer from south of Clohall knows. Dieter stuck his chest out ever so slightly. But if you must know, Perel's war with Olteo hasn't stopped traveling in other lands. Coupled with Saedra's calling, an inquisitive mind would be like a large swath of fertile soil in the hands of an expert farmer. There is a great opportunity for growth. The monk simply shook his head and entered the inn without saying anything else. Both Jarl and Tamilia turned to Dieter to coax a more detailed answer out of him. Other than Alrenian Empire being just that, I have nothing more to add. Let's go inside. The farmer followed the monk inside. Malam let out a dry laugh as the group stepped inside. What an odd group you all are. Well, if it makes you feel any better, Ripson really wasn't someone we expected to be coming along. Tamilia opened the door and the three stepped inside, leaving the cold behind. They were greeted to a wide lobby filled with rectangular tables, each shouldering the combined weights of lit and unlit candles and lanterns, surrounded by plates of food at various stages of consumption. Tankards sloshing with beer waved in the air like puppets attached to strings, as many of the patrons finished up a song in celebration of the day's work coming to an end. They paid no mind to the entering party and continued to chatter about the day's events, the play to come, and the Moon Troop in general. The bar of the tavern, directly across from the doors, had a small vacancy, which Ripson and Josephine squeezed into as they made an effort to wave down the person working. The barmaid darted from one side to the other, only offering a curt wave of acknowledgement to the pair as she tended to the patrons who required her attention first. After a moment, and An exchange of friendly shouts with coins and beer exchanging hands, she rushed back to the opposite side. This time, she made a point to address the farmer and monk. Yeah, apologies for the wait. Apologies for the wait. I'll get to you next. Or Alida will have my backside for being a liar and an oath breaker. The barmaid spun tightly and playfully slammed her hands down on the bar. A wicked grin flashed across her face, mischievous and intent, as she struck up a quick discussion with a particular patron who looked a little too far in her drinks. Josephine leaned close to Ripson. Does the moon troupe usually garner this much attention? The monk's pupils drifted to the corner of his eyes. Truthfully, I've never seen a performance by them, but from word of mouth, as far as one may be inclined to believe such things, they put on quite a show. Have they not performed in your area? They have in Clohall and even in Broomteal, but it's rather tough for those of us to make time or have the coin to afford that sort of luxury. A slow nod was his initial response. I always seem to miss him, even when they've performed in places nearby as well. Wouldn't have mattered had I had the coin or not, but that does signal what sort of luck I tend to have with them. Oh, but you seem so serious all the time. The farmer leaned closer with a smirk on her face. Do you even know how to have a bit of fun? Would you even know what to do if you found your way to a play? A hearty laugh escaped Ripson's lips. The warm glow of his laugh softened his stoic demeanor. I take my duty seriously, so when I do have a moment's reprieve, I enjoy it. My innermost self would berate me for allowing the opportunity to slip. You are a weird one. Josephine closed her eyes for a second and nodded. She snapped her attention forward as the barmaid finally stopped in front of the two to address their wants. Thanks for being patient. It's a whole lot busier than it usually is this time of year. Lina let out a sharp sigh as she quickly eyed the pair. Well, have the clouds dragged in more rain and snow to ruin this festive time? The farmer tilted her head toward the monks. You certainly leave a specific impression on people. Perhaps I reflect what they show me. Ripson gave a half-hearted shrug. Lina snorted and placed a fist on her hip. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. How is Tornes? The monk's eyes threw darts in the barmaid's direction, making her fidget from his pointed gaze. After a brief pause, she returned his stare with one of her own, if not quite as direct, and shrugged. Don't know. I'm here. Haven't been back home in a long while. Give it time. Time may heal old wounds, but it has a way of also making us hunger for those things best left in the past. You're the one that brought it up. Or is that your roundabout way of telling me you're hungry? A smile, thin as a needle, poked through her features. Yeah, in my grouchy roundabout way. A matching smile protruded from the monk's stern presentation. Josephine's smile grew wider as she glanced back and forth between the barmaid and the monk. The barmaid counted his traveling companions, and her eyes widened briefly. 6 of you. Even a giant oaf like yourself can make friends. I'm happy to see that. New tricks for an old man like myself. Praise be to Atumu. The phrase drew a couple curious looks from the nearby patrons. Try that again. The phrase drew a couple curious looks from the nearby patrons, which Ripson ignored. Is Malco around? He might be doing the rounds, you know. Lina stood on the tips of her toes and peered around the room at the various groups trying to find the owner. Not very often the moon troupe chooses to perform here, after all. The monk scratched his chin with his index finger and thumb. Though it will be cramped, can we use that room? Yeah, key's in its usual place. I'll send up some leftovers here in a few and tell Malco you're here when I get the chance. Thanks, Lina. He bowed his head in her direction. I do what I can, Ripson. She winked and immediately darted back to her duties behind the bar, while intermittently preparing the snacks for one of the groups. The towering monk motioned for the others to follow him as he led them to a flight of stairs on the western side of the tavern. These stairs were steep So much so that even Ripson opted to hold onto the railing as he guided them to the second story. At the top, he waited and provided a helping hand to each of them on the final step. Goodness, Amelia peeked down the opening, like trying to climb a tree where there's only one way to go. Mom mimicked her, but scrunched his mouth to one side. It's difficult, but what's the problem? It's just as much a problem going up as it is climbing down. Charles stepped to the side. He didn't need to look down again. That only means it's easy to navigate. Milan moved away from the opening as the group continued to follow Ripson halfway down the hall. That's one way to look at it. Tamelia shook her head and stepped away from the stairs. But I meant that the only way to go up or down them is through a lot of trouble. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. The monk stopped in front of a plain door and knocked twice. He looked down the hallway, to his left, and then to his right. After a short pause, he grabbed at the jamb, slightly above where the middle hinge of the door was nailed in. With a sudden jerk, a portion of the frame came loose, revealing a small compartment that housed a key. He snatched the key with his free hand and set the wooden panel back into place with one clean motion. Once he was certain things looked in their proper place, he unlocked the door and motioned for the others to enter. As they were filing in, Dieter plucked one of the lanterns from the hallway to illuminate the room. The room opened up into a shape of a rectangle, more wide than long. On the far end, in one corner, a clean bed rested. Slightly beyond its foot, in the wall, a panel with a brass knob fixed to its center stared back at the group. Next to the head of the bed, a small reading chair, accompanied by a circular side table, with enough space for a plate or drink, but not much else, sat undisturbed. Along the wall, and closer to the group, there was a dinner table and 2 chairs. The farmers sat on the chairs as Dieter set the lantern on the table. The younger pair leaned against its edge, but only enough to not jostle the lantern from its position. Malam raced across the room and flopped himself onto the bed, eliciting a glare from Ripson, who moved methodically toward the panel and tapped it a few times with his stubby middle finger before sliding the cover upward. He reached into the opening and grabbed a bell and rang it loudly. The others looked at one another as they began taking off their equipment and winter clothing. After shedding their gear and setting it in one of the empty corners, a stillness filled the room. Moments later, a muffled ringing of a series of small bells broke the settling quietude. Most of the group traded another round of questioning looks while Ripson returned to the panel. The ringing grew louder and louder until a tray holding 6 bowls of soup, 6 spoons, and a plate covered with an assortment of rolls appeared. The monk, with the help of Josephine and Dieter, doled out the soup and spoons and set the plate of rolls on the table. In the middle of the meal, a soft knock came from the door. The door slowly opened, with an older man, closer to the farmer's age, slipped into the room. Dressed in long-sleeved cottons of light blue that offset his dark, loose-fitting slacks, he silently acknowledged the group with nods and curt bows until his eyes met the monk's. A large grin erupted across his face, and a kind energy sparkled. A large grin erupted across his face, and a kind energy sparkled in his eyes. Ripson, slight surprise to see you, and in company of so many friends. Malco stretched out his arms to embrace before stopping at the side of the monk, pointing to his unfinished meal. Apologies for the intrusion. Lina told me you were here, and even with the Moon Troop blessing us with their presence, I didn't want you to feel as though I was ignoring you. The monk wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Not thinking that at all. I'm simply grateful you still have this room available. Malco eyed the group momentarily, sheathing his ego the best he could as he delivered his next words carefully. I made you that promise, even if it was so long ago. It'd have to be a major emergency for me to think of using it. though I do say, space is a bit tight with all of you here. Don't suppose that means you have another room free elsewhere, do you? Tamilia's expression brightened a little bit. Unfortunately not. The innkeeper shook his head and sighed. His grin morphed into a faintly warm smile. I've already had to turn away people for the last few days. Now, some have decided to just play cards and gamble downstairs, dozing off a little bit in between hands. I see. She buried her spoon in her soup. But won't you have to kick them out at some point? Only when they start fighting. But lately it's when they started to stink. He laughed. Ew. Her face soured as she imagined the gross smells from people who did nothing but sit around, drink, and play card games all day and night. Yeah, you could try a couple of the other inns, but I suspect they're fuller than a creek in spring. And plus, between you, me, and a lot of you here, they aren't going to offer you as good of a rate as I have. Malco winked, and her face reddened. Oh, I didn't mean that as an attack on you or the inn. Malco waved his hand. His words carried a mirth to them. He had made no effort in hiding. No worries. Like I said, I have a promise with Ripson, and I intend to keep. Praise be to Atumu. The monk signaled in agreement. Let his decision to give us free will be recognized. Yeah, for he gave us choice, which birthed thought, then reason. Jarl noticed a curious glance between Dieter and Josephine before returning to his meal. Malam remained focused on his food without even bothering to join in any part of the conversation. Tamilia picked apart a roll and dunked it into the soup. An awkward silence crept back into the room, like an uneven wheel wobbling down the road. After a short pause, Malco sharply bowed and placed his hand on the doorknob. Well, do enjoy your meal. I will... Oh, before you go, Jahar haphazardly placed the soup on the table, nearly spilling some of it. Do you think we could check your guestbook records? Halfway out the door, the innkeeper brought his head back in from behind the door by leaning awkwardly backward. Pardon? Your guestbook. My friend and I are wondering if a couple of our friends stayed here or elsewhere while they were passing through Faladne. Tamila aggressively pointed at Dieter and Josephine. They're also looking for their son. Malco sucked in a lung full of air through his teeth. He sighed, allowing the air to seep out of him slowly. I'm not necessarily against your request, but it'll take some time to collect them. How long were you thinking? Oh, nothing too horribly far back. Say, since Saedra's calling first appeared? Less about the time frame and more about the amount of people who came through here. But I'll make sure to pass them to you, or have Lina do so as soon as I have them all gathered up. With that, Malco shut the door, while the group continued their meal. The two friends waded in a slower portion of the Husfern River. Usually on a warm summer day like today, the four of them would come out here, but duties and plans kept the pairs separated. The boys got to enjoy the cool waters and a lazy day, while the girls were tasked with learning to safely collect honey from the bees. They did little to disrupt the water, listening to it babble, providing them a relaxing time after the last 2 days of farming they had to endure. Hardwin, having hit his growth spurt sooner than Jahar, stretched his hands high up into the air. He looked at his friend with a bit of a glare. I get it. What? You're taller than me. I was just stretching. Whatever. Oh, come on. Charles stomped away onto the riverbank. Then you're really not going to like what I have to tell you. He stopped and crossed his arms. Is that why you wanted to come out here? Yes and no. Hardrum pushed through the water to get closer to his friend. I'm tired, but I also wanted to tell you my secret, since you told me yours. Oh. He sheepishly kicked the dirt clinging onto his feet. It's only fair, right? I guess. He waved for Jahar to come closer, as he glanced to his left and right to make certain they were alone. Once they were close enough, he brought his hand to his mouth and whispered into his friend's ear, as if the trees themselves would tell his secret if heard. Young Jahara winced as he could feel his heart throb, like he was being stung by all the bees in the hive at once. Let me say that again. Young Jahara winced as he could feel his heart throb, like it was being stung by all the bees in the hive at once. He turned away and bit on the inside of his cheek. He coughed to clear his throat. "You all right?" Hardwin moved to face his friend. "I thought you and Tamelia would make a better couple." "And wouldn't leave Vanine to you? You just told me that you wanted to go out there, out to Parale and beyond. You want to go play for the Moon Troop. But what? You think she wants to do the same thing? Have you even talked to her about it? About her dreams? What she wants?" "No, a good time hadn't come up. That, or maybe that is that fate thing you keep talking about." Jarl sighed and his body slumped. "Maybe he's right. Maybe this is my fate." He whipped his arm around his shoulders. "Think about it. You have this dream. This is perfect." He coughed again. "Aye, perfect. See?" He hugged his friend tightly. "Help me put together what I need to tell her. I want this to be special." "Maybe you should play your lute." Morning broke, and Jahar laid motionless, allowing his thoughts to wander and keep him company as the others slept soundly. Awful memory, awful dream. He blinked a few times in an effort to have his eyes adjusted to the darkened room. "I know he said he has a promise to keep with Ripson, but would Malco be all right with us staying here again? He didn't bring up those books last night. I wonder if he forgot, or maybe he was too busy. The Moon Troop is here, after all. Who knows when they may be through here next time." Now I think about it, they've never stopped or even visited Mahri. No one ever does. It's kind of nice, quiet, but it is a bit lonely and sad that the village is left to it on its own. Even with the war with Alteo right next door, nothing. Not so much as a soldier has visited to check on our situation. I wonder, what must it feel like to be considered important or worth risking anything to make sure we are safe and out of harm's way in the eyes of a stranger? Who would act if something were to happen to me? To Tamelia? I can trust she would help if I was in danger, and I would do the same. But anyone else other than our families? Would they even do anything? Hardwins and Vanines did nothing more than voice that responsibility onto the two of us. Complete strangers like Dieter and Josephine have already done more. Or is that what fate does? Gives some more trouble and others a life of ease. Is that how Parale operates? If you're an outsider, by town, by blood, by generational divide? If you're on the outside of some divide, will they even care then? Any of them? Would they lend a hand, or do they expect some kind of payment in return? Whether that's through money, gifts, or recognition, or praise from others and acknowledging that act. In acting on what is a perceived kindness. In offering one's hand out of selfishness. For such things. For greed of gifts possibly promised. Or the fear of guilt for not doing so. Is it truly kindness then? Rooted in such possible negativity upon building such poor foundations? Is the deed still considered good Is the deed still considered good then? Even if the hidden motive is never uncovered? Or does it sit there and solely poison the person until the truth leaks out? Jarl let out a groan from the lower part of his throat and rolled to his side. He strained his ears to gather if anyone else in the room was awake, but all he could hear was the muffled snoring next door and activity on the ground floor underneath. Why did Ripson choose to sleep against the door? Not like anyone's going to sneak in here. Well, traveling in a bigger group is safer. Why does he have to be so weird about it? Dieter's kind of weird too, but Josephine helps keep him from being too weird. With an abrupt twist, he had his back once again on the floor and slowed his breathing. Either he would have relaxed until they woke up or fall back asleep. His thoughts had already bothered him enough for one day. The day rolled by like the clouds above as the group split up to search the town for any additional information, avoiding the work being done on the stage and props for the Moon Troop's coming performance in the west. Dieter and Josephine asked and visited the southern end of town. Jahar and Tamilia covered the northern portion. As the four explored Philadne, the odd pairing of Malam and Ripson stayed behind to rest a little longer. With no success, the Mahrians returned to the inn room. While they were gone, Malco had brought some light snacks, 2 new lanterns, drinks, and 3 thick bundles of parchment rolled up and tied off by a leather cord. The documents had been left untouched as Ripson focused on quietly meditating, leaving Malam to stave off his boredom by himself. The monk ceased his silent reflections the moment the younger pair returned. Wow, you two look like you haven't even moved at all. Tamilia looked over the two as she plucked up a slice of seasoned bread and stuffed it in her mouth. Oh, but you have fresh clothes, Malam. That's good to see. When did you get them? The boy wiggled in his seat on the bed. His tattered clothes had been replaced with simple tan slacks and a fading tunic, viridian in color. Malco brought these to me. He didn't want to see me having to track home looking like I was mauled by some beast. It was a generous offer. He is a good man. Ripson remained seated, and I have been meditating and silently praying. She swallowed her food, snatched one of the cups of cooled marigold tea, and drank about half of it before replying. Hey, this is pretty tasty. That's a step up from your usual grumpy self. One of the monk's eyes pried open. He carefully studied the young woman as she sat at the table, catching a stifled chuckle from Malam. He opened his mouth, took a short breath, and closed his mouth into a frown. Then he snorted through his nostrils. I don't think you need the through his nostrils. Then he snorted. Let's get rid of that. Kapow. I don't know. I think I prefer him talking more than being silent. Malam fidgeted where he sat on the bed. See, even in silence you're grouchy and give people the creeps. Tamilia grinned, not allowing the monk's brooding energies to deter her. Jahar laughed as he joined his friend at the table. He watched Ripson shake his head as a reply from Malam added his presence to the younger pairs. After shifting his seat into a comfortable position, he noticed the parchments. He raised a brow as he looked at Tamilia, then Malam, pointing at them. Malco brought those earlier. The boy poked one of the rolled up pieces of paper. The boy poked one of the rolled up pieces, sending it rolling a couple rotations. I think they're the records from the last few seasons. Oh, that was nice of him to finally bring them to us. Hopefully they're listed hidden here. We had no luck on the northern end of town. She grabbed one of the untied knots, keeping it bound. I guess we try to figure this out ourselves. Ripson opened his eyes. His expression remained unchanged. What is there to figure out? Simply read through them. You'll have your answer soon enough. The two friends exchanged glances, which made the other two trade looks of their own. Malam the monk made no effort to assist them and observed the poor performance playing out before them. Jahar and Tamilia twisted and turned the sheets of parchment as they tried to make heads or tails of the document. Though they were able to set them up properly to read, they had no clue what any of the writings meant. Ripson stood up and stretched his arms. You have no idea what you have no idea what you're looking for, do you? It's not embarrassing, you know. It's not a skill most people need. Malam picked one of the loose parchments, skimming through its content. Fine. Tamilia tossed the record she was holding onto the table. We can't read secrets out Nothing to be ashamed about. Ripson grabbed the sheet she was holding and began to read over it. Took me a long time to learn how to read. Though it would be a good skill to learn if you plan on traveling, I'd say. Not a good feeling to be at the whims of someone else. Better to have a hand on the rudder than to allow the whims of others to do all the guiding. Malam rattled his head in agreement. My mother always hammered that idea in my head when I was younger. And my father has always told me that I must be ready to make whatever choices I need to when the opportunities come along. They make life as an adult sound complicated. And that is life. It can be complicated. But the simplest way to go about it is you must convince yourself that all the choices you made are the correct ones. Malam gazed into Ripson's eyes as though he was trying to stare through the monk. He slowly shook his head. No, that flows into madness. It's less about the right and wrong of things and more about whether or not you can convince yourself the actions you took were worth it all along. The younger trio traded frowns and awkward half-started gestures. Eventually they shrugged and gave up trying to parse out what Ripson was alluding to. Malam broke the silence with a sharp clap. In the meantime, let's help. What names are we looking for? The two friends exchanged a brief back and forth before answering in unison. Hardwin and Vanine. That is the end of chapter 20. Okay, so yeah, that is a bit of a doozy of a chapter. Compared to the others here. We will go through this little bit of the index. So, there's a few entries on this. Actually, this is probably one of the beefier ones, at least for number of, the amount of entries into it. The Alrenian Empire is the Empire of Alren across the Malgean Sea, which separates the conquered territories of Alren and the lands of Bruntil, Clohal, Ulteo, Perael, Rowan, etc. Within the last 15 years, it has conquered a loose collection of city-states, now called the state of Kolug. Balauk was once a rival city-state to Kolug and Sudug until the Night of Ash. Divine winds across the Malgean Sea in the area of the Alrenian. If I can learn to even pronounce the words I write up and make. Across the Malgean Sea in the area of the Alrenian Empire, wind is believed to be from the divine, considered to be how the gods cast immediate judgment of a moment. Kolug, the strongest of a collection of warring city-states, once conquered, the provincial leaders established their governance in this city-state and named the surrounding lands the state of Kolug. Nakri is the god of wealth and coin. Night of Ash, and a catastrophe occurring in Balauk, Kolug, Sudug, and the port city Opan. Opan was razed and scattered to the wind, while the three other city-states took moderate damage. Many still believe the attacks were carried out by spies to weaken them for invasion. However, the Alrenian Empire has denied it ever had a hand in such a nefarious act to this day, but no other explanation has ever been put forth. Dun, dun, dun. Sudug, once a rival city-state of Balauk and Kolug until the Night of Ash, and it is also Ripson's hometown. Winter's Embrace. Due to the climate of the Alrenian Empire, winter can be rather harsh with heavy snowfall. So, yeah. It's just a way of saying it. But, yeah. So, yeah, so that is chapter 20. A lot of chunky business going on there with, getting some details. Let's see if I can bring it up. Is this the image? Yes, okay. We will. All right. Woohoo. So, yeah, so currently right here in Philodne. So, and then getting fairly close to Saemine/Perel Castle Town. There's Dolaire, Torness, Mahri is right over here. So, yeah, instead of going westerly, it'd be going down here through Clohall, and then way down further is Bruntil and Kolug, and then the Malgian Sea, and then the Alrenian Empire. So yes, so it is down that way. So that is where Ripson is originally from and stuff. So get a little bit of detail about Ripson, and just kind of coloring in. And this is another thing too, right? So there's that interaction that's going on, and so you have that interaction going on, and then it's like, well, how do you seed that information in there? Like, if the person doesn't want to talk about it, and then you're like, well, okay, it's for example, there was always that trouble with like games and stuff like that, especially just how clunky it was. I was like, it is your 16th birthday. Remember that your family did this and that and stuff, and it's like, yes, I would remember this. There's no reason to regurgitate it in this way. So that the index is my sneaky way to get around that. If you want to know a little bit more about it, so like the Night of Ash. So there's a whole bit about that, like what's going on. So, and that is it. What's going on? So, yeah, that is going to be it for the reading this week. And then we'll pick it back up with chapter 21, because chapter 21 is kind of long. Not as long, but it's still long. But we will do chapters 21 and possibly 22. Because, yes. So, we'll do that. That'll be it. But, like I said at the beginning, it'll be on May 4th, because I work next Saturday, so... yeah. Yes. But yeah, May 4th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, thank you for sticking around. I didn't even really get to enjoy my biscotti. My coffee is almost all gone. What have I done? Yeah, I got a bite of a biscotti. And I'll fill up the coffee and do it another time. But that's it. Thank you for watching, hanging out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I'll catch you another time. Toodles.